What is the clearest case of living in denial that you've seen? Story 1. My brother is married for the 4th time. My mother blames all his ex-wives. I keep pointing out that her son is the common link to all the divorces. I know someone who just blew up his second marriage in a spectacular way, but his family still blames the exes. I'm like, the hell, guys? My ex threw a soda can at my face, and his whole family knew about it, and they still called me a bitch for leaving and said he could do better. Sometimes it's very obvious where the problem came from. It's the, if you think all the other drivers on the road are a-holes, maybe you're the a-hole. An elderly lady is watching the news waiting for her husband to come home and sees an alert about a driver going full speed in the wrong direction. Knowing he is on the way, she calls her husband to warn him. Honey, be careful driving. There's a crazy person on the highway driving the wrong way. One of them, the husband replied. There's hundreds. Story 2. The nurse, who thought the lump in her breast was nothing important, and the open sore appearing was also nothing important, and once it started draining, thought it was nothing important despite dressing it daily, was confronted by coworkers after the smell became so rank it lingered where she went. Stage 4 cancer with metals to bones and brain. Died soon after. She was the manager of the oncology unit. To add, because I must not have been clear and a lot of people see this as an autonomous choice, this was a case of living in denial. Once confronted about her odor, she admitted to the sore but still thought it was nothing. Agreed to go to the ED with a colleague/friend, but only to reassure them. The oncologist consulted in the ED, and she lost it when cancer was mentioned. Insisted on everything done to treat despite no hope. Died within the month. Never left the hospital from the time when confronted about odor. This was almost me. My husband found my lump before I did, so he wouldn't let me brush it off. I was 25 and didn't believe people that young could get breast cancer, let alone me who exercised, ate healthy, and never smoked. I went to my doctor and she felt it and said something along the lines of, yeah, there's a lump. We need an ultrasound to see it though. I asked, can you tell if it's a cyst? She said, no. I asked the woman performing my ultrasound, is it a cyst? She told me, we can't tell. You need a biopsy. I was in such denial that I was sure the biopsy would have told me it was a cyst. Came back as invasive ductal carcinoma. I can understand this. I used to do oncology adjacent work, and a lot of providers wouldn't treat their own cancer if they were to get it. When you do cancer work, it's almost necessary to have a level of dissonance against the possibility of proximate suffering, or else you will burn out. Not even getting a consult to confirm, however, seems really nutty. People who work in medicine in general are often very conservative about the kinds of treatments they will accept personally. I know that GPs are also reluctant. Many doctors who get something like a cancer diagnosis with a poor prognosis, especially when older, will do relatively little about it. Palliative treatment often avoids major surgeries and intense chemotherapy. I think perhaps because they've seen what can go wrong with more aggressive care far too often. My boyfriend was a cardiothoracic surgeon, and when he was diagnosed with glioblastoma, he opted not to have a resection. He had seen too much. He died 3 months after diagnosis. It's an ugly, certain death kind of cancer. My mom died of one, and she lasted less than a month between diagnosis and death, though I think she knew something was wrong and intentionally put it off as long as she could. The surgeon who did her surgery had a colleague who'd gotten diagnosed with one, and so I asked how he dealt with it, feeling like there was maybe some other route of treatment. Suicide? Yeah, it's about that bad. Sorry for your loss. That's an awful one to get when you're young. Story 3. Friend diagnosed with diabetes 10 years ago, has needle phobia, so afraid of pricking his fingers to monitor his blood sugar so doesn't, and just eats healthy. Due to blood sugar fluctuations, gradually goes blind and kidney failure. 3.5 years on dialysis, then finally gets a kidney transplant. Home again with a new kidney, is still afraid of pricking his fingers and decides he will manage his diabetes by eating healthy just like he did for the past 10 years. How did he qualify for a new kidney with self-care habits that bad? I don't think they asked that because when he was on dialysis 3 times a week, the hospital monitors your blood sugar, but the reason he was on dialysis was because he didn't manage his blood sugar, and now that his kidney is functional, he does not have any but periodic appointments at the hospital. You'd think that after having a large bore needle in his arm for a significant length of time 3 times a week for 3.5 years that a finger prick would be well within the realm of acceptability. It honestly makes me think there must be something wrong with his brain. It took him 5 months in hospital to recover from the transplant surgery, complications, and all that time they were pricking his fingers 3 times a day in the hospital. He complained to me that his fingertips were numb from it. I said they are going to be numb either from pricks to monitor your blood sugar or from diabetic neuropathy that happens because you're not controlling your blood sugar. One way happens because you're doing what you need to do to stay alive. The other way happens because you're on your way to dying. Numb fingertips are not avoidable for you, and they're not a reason to die, but it's like he literally can't make himself do it, and so just spins a story about how his way of doing things still works. Story 4. That'd be my father. My mother was manic depressive, as it was called back then. She had several major breakdowns during my childhood. Every time he'd act like nothing was wrong. She'd be screaming and throwing things, and he'd just try to placate her. It never worked. A couple of times, I pointed out that she needed to be committed. He always responded that a person couldn't be committed unless they're a danger to themselves or others. True, but she obviously was. I was terrified of her. Even apart from the breakdowns, she threw rage attacks at the drop of a hat. Long story short, in my 20s, I found out that A, they'd had 2 kids before me, and B, she'd drowned them in a bathtub during a psychotic episode. What I never found out was how she got released or why she was able to conceive me less than a year later. A friend was with me when I found out about B. He told me later that he'd always thought I was exaggerating when I said I'd feared for my life as a kid. I couldn't blame him, it does sound outlandish. After that, it was even more baffling that my father thought we were safe living with her. I have a mother like that, but she was single. She did involuntarily commit pretty regularly. I'd end up in foster care, but as soon as she was out, the state would just send me back. There are no good answers for mental health in the US. It's broken as heck, and kids often suffer for it. I hope you found peace of mind. Wow, I'm so sorry. My mom was also bipolar when I was a kid, but my grandparents had her involuntarily committed, and she was able to get medication and has been doing fine for decades now. If she'd had a partner who enabled her to that extent, it absolutely could have been that bad. She was off the rails. I understand some of the interpersonal/social dynamics that make it difficult and awkward for people to step into that kind of situation or to acknowledge a parent's mental illness to their child, but at some point, you just have to buck up and do it. I'm sorry your dad and everybody else apparently wasn't there for you, or your mom. Hugs to you. I suffer from a mild psychotic disorder that, when medicated, is barely noticeable, but I had to build up a life and then lose it after I suffered psychotic delusions at work and destroyed everything that I worked for before I knew I had a family history of mental illness. My mother just told funny stories about her mother and how she wouldn't leave her room for days and they would have to bring her trays of food and empty her bedpan, how the way her mom went and became a member of a sailboat crew and competed in the World Cup and then came back home and beat them for 3 months and then decided that she would be a professional bowler and toured the United States for 6 months and then came back home and beat them for 3 months. That was stories that she was telling me so that I felt sorry for her. She had these massive pity parties for herself. She hid the fact that her mother had some kind of psychotic disorder and she didn't tell me until I suffered a breakdown and was hospitalized for months. Gee, thanks mom, and to think I could have gotten it treated when I was 15 years old if I had known the truth and not let the psychiatrist blow me off for just being an angsty teen. Please get evaluated, just in case. Not because I think that you might have something hereditary that your mom passed on to you, but to prevent you from experiencing the loss that I have had in my life, if that were to be the case. Just get evaluated. Anytime you feel your mental health is a little shaky, anytime you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or experience a major life event like a divorce or a job loss, get evaluated. Then get evaluated again. See a doctor and tell them the truth about any symptoms you're having at that time and any you've had in the past. And don't be scared to tell them the truth. It doesn't mean anything about you if you have a similar condition, except that you need to take medication to manage them, the way a diabetic does with their blood sugar. Admitting to having symptoms doesn't mean anything about you except that you're sick. Please, 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 if you start having symptoms, don't ignore them or dismiss them. See a doctor. You are at higher risk than most other people with that family history, and if you start having any symptoms, you can address them before they affect your life at all. Knowing the medication will not turn you into a zombie, and no one ever has to know except for you and your doctor. Don't be too embarrassed or ashamed of it or afraid of the diagnosis to see a doctor. You should actually be more afraid of what it could do to your life if you don't catch it early. Really. From experience, make sure that your doctor has that documented in your family history, and if you have any issues ever, get evaluated by a doctor. Not a therapist or a psychologist, a psychiatrist. A doctor who specializes specializes in psychiatry and psychiatric disorders, who can diagnose and prescribe medications. Story 5. My sister wears flannel shirts and has really short hair, drives a Subaru and wears a battle axe necklace, and has a pile of Sports Illustrated swimsuit editions and a lesbian pride flag in her room. And my mom still hasn't figured out that she's gay. My mother was the opposite. She knew my sister was gay by putting together pieces of evidence that weren't actually there. Mom, with an aura of confidentiality, I think your sister is a lesbian. Why would you think that? Well, she's a theater kid, yet the close friends she's made in college are all on the volleyball team. One of them must be a girlfriend. Is there any other reason that you'd think that other than that theater kids don't hang out with volleyball players unless they're all lesbians? Mom: no, not really. A few months later, my sister told me, don't tell Mom, but I'm a lesbian. One of my best friends in high school was flamboyantly gay, like super obviously gay, and made no effort to hide it. He had posters of Orlando Bloom and Brokeback Mountain hanging up in his room, and had a string of new friends, boyfriends, spend the night all the time. However, his parents were either in denial or completely oblivious. When he finally came out, they seemed absolutely shocked but immediately accepted him. They said boys couldn't spend the night anymore though. I cut off all my hair, literally buzzed for years, stopped wearing dresses, skirts, and purses, changed my name from a long feminine name to a shorter ambiguous version, EX Maxine to Max or Samantha to Sam, and my family still seems to have failed to put the clues together. They also won't call me my new name. I'd say something, but they are Trump voters and I have them on an information diet anyway. Not worth the pain of the inevitable argument. Story 6. My mother, now deceased, refused to wear glasses because she hated how they looked on her. Instead, she insisted her eyesight was not that bad, and the fact that we had to read menus to her at restaurants was just a cute quirk. My stepdad once asked, when are they going to put the letters on those big green signs, while driving on the freeway. I've never gotten in a car with him since. He insists that he was joking, but past evidence indicates that he wasn't. My grandpa was similar. He was a fiercely independent farmer, built his own house, raised 6 kids, etc. Stubborn as a mule, kept driving well past 80 but drove slower and slower all the time. When asked why, he said it was because he couldn't see beyond the front of the car. Yeah, I wasn't getting in the car if he was driving. I was in denial of my deteriorating vision for years because of bullying. Didn't get glasses until I literally couldn't see the overhead anymore. I was 15. It made me so happy when I looked out the window and I could see all the leaves on the trees. There really isn't an excuse to not get them unless you have no insurance. There are so many styles and colors that something will look good on your face. There are strings to prevent you from losing them. The experience of seeing everything is well worth the minor inconvenience of putting them on and keeping them safe. I have 2 pairs to pick up this weekend. I got them on sale, $150 total. Story 7. Buddy keeps complaining that normal guys won't respond to him on dating apps and keep getting hit on by creepy old dudes. You're nearly 60, and those are age-appropriate matches. I'm 43, and I'm sort of friends with mostly colleagues with some guys my age, but mostly older. They look their age or older. Nothing insulting, just it's less likely that guys have taken care of their skin, dress appropriately for their body types, etc. The amount of complaining they do about women who are too old for them is wild. I have a friend who's 50 this year and complained that 35-year-old women look too old. Another guy is nearly 50 and said he's finally ready to settle down and have kids and can't believe he can't find a 30-year-old willing to do the same with him. Almost all of them have 39 as the maximum age if they are on dating apps, and they grow more misogynist over time, but mostly sad and frustrated. I, a 37-year-old female, recently had a 59-year-old guy that I wasn't even interested in tell me that I'm willing to lower my standards and overlook the fact that you're overweight because you're smart. I'm 5'10" and 145 pounds. I really hope you told him you couldn't possibly date someone old enough to be your father. No. The guy knows he's too old, and he's got a million excuses lined up. He's expecting that fight. He's empowered by it, which gives him a reason to look down on women who bring it up. What you need to do is take something that is not wrong with him, something he's proud of, and casually reject or insult him for that instead. If he's got good hair, tell him you're into older guys but like guys who are confident enough to bald rather than cling to their obviously thinned out hair. If he looks like he hits the gym, tell him you like older guys who actually stay in shape and eat healthy, and he's not your type. he'll have an aneurysm. If he drives a Porsche, tell him you're really into older car guys, but at his age, he should really be driving a Ferrari. Guys in their 40s with a wife and kids can afford Porsches. If he's got a golf membership, tell him that's embarrassing. He really needs a membership to X Club he can't afford. His self-confidence is obviously hanging on by tissue paper. Go rip at it. Story 8. Ex's mom moved to Vegas from Europe, went broke gambling over 10 or so years, practically homeless. Then she got injured on a casino escalator and was compensated more than fairly with a life-changing amount of money. Guess who went broke again, pretty much exclusively at the same casino? That's probably why the casino settled, because they knew her as a regular and knew she would be giving it back to them in no time. Basically amounted to a loan of their money. I think my mother-in-law sounds like she is just like your ex's mom. The woman spent over $3 million of her husband's money, but since the money was gone, she started going to GA, so I guess she thinks she is off the hook. Did I mention this woman is 74 and watches TikTok? She acts like a kid. She goes to the hair salon 2 times a month and she has huge white chompers teeth because she refuses to ever have dentures. She lives in South Florida on the beach. What the fuck? She also loves her lawsuits. One more thing. I got a settlement like 10 years ago for $16K. The money was not huge, but she told my husband and me we should split the money, and then he would give her half of that. We told her it was taken for taxes. You have to lie sometimes to this woman. She will stop talking for years to her only son for her mental health, but when she wants something, she pops back up. We are down here this week and I refuse to go inside her condo. I made her come outside to see me. She has COVID. Why do I say that when she refuses to take a test? She has been sick for a week, but she refuses to even go to the hospital and check because she might have that thing down her throat. I could go on and on. Story 9. My dismissive, avoidant mom was a master of denial. The worst was when she got an abscess in her pelvic area. She was in 10 out of 10 pain, couldn't sit up, was literally white-knuckling a body pillow while laying on the couch, unable to move for a week. And when I, age 10, would suggest she go to a doctor, it was all, "Oh, no, I'm totally fine. I don't need to see a doctor." This woman literally scheduled an appointment with a specialist and waited the 10-ish days for the appointment, instead of going to urgent care. She drove herself there in 10 out of 10 pain. The doctor took one look at her and told her to put on a gown and meet her downstairs for immediate surgery. They drained so much yuck from her, and she had to have the gauze packing to heal the crater left behind, etc. It's a miracle she didn't get sepsis. Bonus story, she's suddenly become allergic to ibuprofen in her 40s and turned beet red after taking some. Instead of going to the doctor, she went to her hair appointment like normal. The hairdresser refused to cut her hair and made her go to the doctor. My mom just went home instead and laid on the couch huffing and puffing until the reaction went away. She told me this story like it was totally sane and a normal thing to do. Yeesh. My mom was similar, would white-knuckle her way through every illness she ever had and then expected to be praised and admired for her endurance. And I think the worst, would expect us as children to do the same. Just hold out until we get better, maybe with some painkillers to help. Yeah, I grew up believing that I was so tough for never taking pain meds. I was literally so convinced that I would get addicted to the Vicodin from my wisdom teeth surgery, not my mom's doing, that I wouldn't take them and instead took nothing. I then wondered why on earth it hurt so much. Then I had some actual injuries and yeah, screw that. Give me ibuprofen. I don't have the patience for this treatable pain. Story 10. My dad has PSP/dementia. My mom refused to acknowledge that it was a developing problem because it was an inconvenience to their lifestyle. I confronted her because he needed to have his driver's license taken away because he was a danger on the road. My dad impulsively went out one day, bought a BMW without her present, and later drove it underneath a semi-truck. And, shocker, that was when she realized he was unwell. I also had to find out through extended family about his accident because she didn't want to give us the satisfaction of being right all along. This reminds me of when my brother was 13 and I warned my mother that he was showing signs of depression and anxiety. She told me, "I'm not dealing with that again." I was being treated for depression and anxiety at the time. My brother is almost 30 now and has barely left the house since he graduated high school. He doesn't do anything but play video games. My husband's grandpa had died from Alzheimer's/dementia complications. He was supposed to live with his daughter, my MIL, after his wife died, but never made it to our state. My mother-in-law is in her 60s and getting cloudy. She's sharp as a whip, so this was concerning. At first, she dismissed it, but she has been seeing specialists for the past year. Gotta get ahead of it. I've only known this woman for 6 years, but damn if it doesn't hurt knowing she might have dementia as well. My husband's worst fear is having Alzheimer's too, and he won't take much convincing to get tested. I'm so sorry this happened to your dad. It sounds scarily similar to what happened with my grandpa. I worked in an assisted living home, and I kept telling my parents that my grandpa's dementia was worse than some of the people I helped care for. Dad wouldn't listen. Even after grandpa missed a highway exit and put his truck into reverse, straight into traffic, they let him drive for almost 3 years after that. It's ridiculously dangerous, and I constantly worried that he would hurt himself or somebody else. Story 11. So my sister gets married, her husband's family are pretty heavy drinkers, and it's the full range of drinks. Beers whenever, mixed drinks, straight hard liquor like vodka, whatever's on hand, and plenty of it, 7 days a week, and all day on weekends, holidays, etc. So her husband's brother, late 20s, hits it a lot harder than even the other people in his family. A full handle of vodka after work every day is kind of hard. 4 or 5 over a weekend all by himself. So he gets sick, not feeling well, tired, etc., but just puts it down to getting older and maybe not handling his liquor like he used to, but doesn't cut back at all. Once he starts turning yellow, he gets to the doctor, who tells him his liver is shot, full cirrhosis. There's nothing left of it, whatever. He tells the doc he doesn't know why. He doesn't drink any more than the people he knows. It's a mystery, but he'll stop entirely to get put on a list for a new liver. He obviously doesn't stop drinking and doesn't even cut back. Everyone knows it's the drinking and cirrhosis, but he and his family start calling it cancer. It's cancer, so the drinking has nothing to do with it. So he eventually ends up in the hospital full time because there's no liver for him yet, and his family starts sneaking vodka into the hospital so that he can keep drinking. He left the hospital on a slab, and the family started asking people for money for cancer walks and stuff like that, and not one of them cut back on drinking at all. Horrifying and heartbreaking. This is the exact same situation my ex is in right now. He grew up in a household of heavy drinkers, always saw large amounts of alcohol being consumed on a regular basis since he was a child, and has always associated alcohol with good times. Now he's 35 and has been an alcoholic since he was 15, and is addicted to the point where he has to drink immediately after waking up and will probably die soon if he doesn't get professional help getting sober. Everyone in his life is an alcoholic and doesn't see an issue with his behavior. I'm the only person who has told him he needs to be in a treatment facility. Cutting back isn't going to save you from life-threatening addiction. It's so sad seeing someone who is completely unable to get the help they need because everyone they love and care about is under the same influence. However, the family lying and claiming it's cancer in this scenario is insane. I know a lot of people in deep denial about their alcoholism, but they're also deeply ashamed as well. Heard a similar story from my ex. His dad apparently turned yellow after not feeling well for a while. He went to the doctor and they told him he had cancer the size of a softball in his liver. He died within a week. According to my ex, his dad wasn't an alcoholic. He had been drinking in the garage for months to numb the pain. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but my ex is 100% going to die from alcoholism, and his brother isn't far behind him. Sad story, but one I can actually top. A family of moms plus 5 adult children. Mom plus 4 kids go through the exact scenario you've detailed, including calling it cancer and sneaking whiskey into the hospital. So they lived your same scenario 5 times. The one survivor is the only family member who was never a drinker. Her drug of choice is men who beat the living crap out of her. Incredibly sad, and they were the nicest people. Well, except one a-hole. Story 12. My elderly friend, who has fallen 4 times already, broken 2 ribs once, a wrist once, and bruised up the other times, he still refuses to use a cane out of some male pride thing. He can't understand that we all age, and if he keeps falling, he will end up with a broken hip and bedridden and miserable. My husband's 93-year-old grandma is exactly the same. She can barely walk 2 steps without falling over, but refuses to use her walking sticks. She's fallen downstairs, fallen out of bed, fallen in her garden, etc., and still insists that she's fine. She's not. She's a walking skeleton being held together by compression socks and ready meals. My mother has fallen twice in the past month and can barely get out of a chair without help. She should be using a cane or a walker, but refuses. My dad has had 2 hip replacements and walks with a cane. They're in their mid-80s and live in a 2-story house with no bed or bath on the first floor. They regularly talk about finding a nice ranch house someday when the steps get to be too too much for them. Like the housework and yard work aren't already too much for them. I'd given up on nagging them to move to an apartment or condo, and have offered multiple times to help them make their current home safer, with stair lifts, extra grab bars, etc. Their response: when we need those things, we'll let you know. Sigh. Not looking forward to the rapid decline that will happen when one of them inevitably breaks a bone. Tell him the story of my grandfather, if you like, for convincing. He had been a very active man all his life until like 8 years ago. He fell from a stepladder, the kind of stupid fall you get back up with a bruise when you're 20 or even 40. Not him, it broke things, and then it kept breaking. He's in constant pain now, in his back, in his legs. He can barely walk. Well, it's more shuffling his feet now. My cousin and I had to almost carry him to a step for Christmas. There's a room with a step. He's bitter. He can't go out anymore, can't do anything all day long. We know it's miserable, and the only thing we can do is start to plan for when he'll have to be strictly confined to bed and alone. I promise your friend, he doesn't want that. Story 13. Probably my boyfriend's mother. They live in squalor and have totally ruined their house by neglecting all responsibilities for 20 plus years, and won't allow anyone into it because it's so dirty. The property is full of junk cars, poison ivy, and stray trash. She brags about their great house and how much money they have, so then pay your personal property taxes, which are overdue for 5 years, which won't happen because they eat out for every meal since the kitchen is out of order. She's an alcoholic and completely dependent on weed. Where is it that you can be behind on property taxes for 5 years? Where I live, you get 3 max before the house gets put up for sale due to tax arrears, even if they would need to pay back taxes in full plus interest. Here in British Columbia, Canada, there was a hoarder on our street who didn't pay his taxes. It took many, many years to evict him, or whatever the term is when you own the place but don't pay your taxes. Then it sat empty for a few years because I think you still get some second chances to pay your taxes before it's up for sale. Then it burned to the ground. Honestly, not sure if it was a fed-up neighbor or what exactly happened there. Now, the guy paid his back taxes and owns the property again and has slowly started to pile junk up in the yard since there's no house. And the cycle continues. Story 14. My family, when my mom was diagnosed with a hereditary, incurable, no survival rate over 4 years of cancer, we all thought she'd be the one to beat it. She was gone within a year at 55 years old. No amount of good diet, exercise, or education can beat bad genes and life's unfairness. The facts were there. It was still like a freight train that hit us. A family friend got the same rare brain cancer that John McCain had at almost the same exact time. He was completely healthy. Actually, no, I would say he was one of those beyond healthy guys who looked 10 to 15 years younger than he was. You would think that John McCain would have had a better time dealing with it due to access to better medical care, and therefore would have lasted longer. But no, they both passed around the same exact time. One story that sticks with me is a friend's father-in-law. Friend is Sheila, husband is John, parents are Mick and Mary. When Sheila and John were dating, they went to Mick and Mary's house for a picnic on a Saturday. In the afternoon, Mick said that he had a really bad headache and was going inside to rest for a bit. No one really thought anything of it. It was hot. They'd been drinking. Everyone thought he was just dehydrated. The headache was even worse on Sunday, and by Sunday night, Mick was in excruciating pain. Mary brought him to the ER, where they found he had a large brain tumor, which until that point had been completely asymptomatic. Basically, the doctor called Mary in and said, "Listen, his time left is days. He can pass here, or you can bring him back home with hospice support to pass there. We can provide pain management in either place, and that is it. Chemo isn't an option, nor is surgery. Make the most of the time you have left." They brought Mick home. The family gathered, and he passed away on Tuesday evening. Everyone was in complete and utter shock. Similar thing with my mom. She got in the hospital, and the emergency doctor said she has 6 months. 48 hours later, the oncologist said actually she maybe had 72 hours left. If we stop the useless treatments now, you have time to bring her to a palliative care house. Otherwise, she's dying in the hospital. There was no time to bring her back home. Hearing her say, "I want to go home," and not being able to will forever haunt me. That and the last thing she said to me before falling into a coma was, "I want to live." I never felt so broken and powerless. Story 15. I am a teacher. I have so many parents in denial about their children's grades or behavior. I once had a kid headbutt me and break my nose because he couldn't go to recess right then and there. But he's an angel at home, where he's only ever playing on a tablet. I also have one parent in particular who has 4 children, and all of them have behavior problems to the point of multiple suspensions or being made to move schools or teachers. And I have to wonder, after 4 children with issues, is it not possible you might be part of the problem? Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.